Lesson. This is just a little question. You've been to the popcorn shop, I assume?
That's where you can go if you do your sermon surveyor.
For those of you who haven't been, okay, guys, I need your intense focus right up here. So for those of you who haven't been to the popcorn shop, it's a candy store. So if you go to the candy store, is it more fun to go with a pocket full of money or a pocket full of nothing?
Money.
Anyone prefer going with a pocket full of nothing? Okay, it's a pretty obvious question, right? Okay, well, yeah, if you're me, you probably should go with a pocket full of nothing. But here's the point of this. When you come to church, some of you come to church like you go to the candy store with a pocket full of nothing. You think, I got nothing to spend here. I got no decisions to make. I got no control to do. So you just kind of, bide your time here. But actually, nothing could be further from the truth, because you have got a lot of years ahead of you. That's something. That's like currency. That's like cold hard cash. Here's a picture. Oh shoot, I left that picture out. I was going to show you a picture of me when I was your age, but at that time, I had a lot of years ahead of me. I had something to spend, and you have something to spend. So I would encourage you to come to the Bible here thinking, I've got decisions to make. How am I going to live my life? Your parents obviously brought you because they value this, but they need you to make choices about how you want to interact with God. Okay, that wasn't the lesson. Here's the beginning of the lesson. How many of you have gotten obsessed about some celebrity, some star, some, contemporary person? No one? Am I the only one? John has.
When I was younger.
No Justin Bieber fans? Okay, maybe that's a little outdated, right?
Yeah.
Or no, Justin Bieber?
No.
Well, who's the guy now?
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland. Who's that?
Spider-Man. Yeah.
Oh, Spider-Man, of course. And you guys, sports people, is that who you get obsessed with? All right, well, I got obsessed with the musical Hamilton. If you've heard of that, it's about Alexander Hamilton. And I started listening to the music, and then I started, going on YouTube and listening to interviews by the guy who wrote it, Lin-Manuel Miranda. And then I started to think, well, I should see this, but it's expensive. So I started to research how to get cheap tickets. And then finally I went, and it was so good. And then I sent a Facebook message to the star who performed. I said, you did a great job. And he actually emailed me back. I'm like, I'm interacting with a star. It was so cool. Well, now I'm onto other things. But here's the point. Back in the day, Jesus was a celebrity. He only had a 3-year ministry, and at the beginning, he was doing miracles at weddings, and he did his baptism. But gradually, as he called his disciples and he started teaching them, people started listening. And so by the time, he's kind of well into his ministry, he was teaching to, 5,000 men and their families. People were coming from all over. And there were people that would make it the extra effort to sit next to him or talk to him. Today's lesson is about a couple of those people, Mary and Martha. They obviously met him somewhere along the way. They became his friends. And today they're going to be, hosting him in his home. So here's what I want you to do. We're going to read the passage. And as we read it, I want you to think, if I was going to teach on this lesson, what would I want to focus on? What would be my focus? Okay? And we'll get to that in a little bit. Oop, don't want to get ahead. So let's read it. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked him, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. Okay, so let's go through it, and as I said, think about what you would teach on if you were going to teach this lesson. What are the things that you would pull out of this that you'd want to take home with you? So let's see, I kind of highlighted some of the things that I want to talk about. Obviously, Jesus and his disciples were on their way. Now, back in that day, every year, all the Jews would try and come to Jerusalem 3 times a year. They would come on Passover, they'd come on Pentecost, and they would come the Feast of Booths or Tabernacles. That was in the winter. But so every year, Jesus would come down from the Nazareth or the Sea of Galilee to Jerusalem. And this was probably one of those times because Mary and Martha lived about 3 miles from Jerusalem. So when people would come, they didn't have Super 8s, all these hotels. They would stay with family and friends, and maybe they did have hotels, but so many people were converging on Jerusalem that they had to stay with people they knew. So this is probably one of those times when Jesus and his disciples are being hosted by them. They came to the village. Bethany is where they live. Like I said, it's just a short distance from Jerusalem. Here's the Google Maps of it. You can see, I don't get it. It takes 5 hours to walk it, but it's only about 4 miles. I don't know why they don't go right straight across. Maybe there's mountains there or something. I don't know. But anyway. So what do we know about Martha, first of all? You know something about Martha?
She's sort of she thinks that you have to make it all perfect for Jesus.
Okay, we know that about her from this passage, right? Yeah. But Mary and Martha, we know a couple of things about them. First of all, they had a brother named Lazarus. And on the last time Jesus comes to Jerusalem, he heals Lazarus. He brings him back from the dead, right? So Martha, in that particular story, this is just the text of it, but what I want you to realize is Jesus comes kind of late. He comes after Lazarus is dead. Listen to what Martha says. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will do whatever you ask. She was a person of faith, I believe. She had deep faith. And Jesus says, your brother will rise again. She says, I know he'll rise at the resurrection. I know we'll all rise when the dead are raised. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. She says, yes, Lord, I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God who came into the world. So anyway, the point is she's a person of deep faith, even though in this story she kind of comes out looking like she's a bit petty. Now, what do we know about Mary, her sister? Well, we know that on one of their trips to Bethany, she anoints Jesus with expensive oil, right? She doesn't care about the money. All she cares about is just giving a self-sacrificial gift to Jesus. She also is a person of deep faith, but her faith and Martha's faith are kind of different. And so we're going to see that today. Let's see. Okay, so that's what we know about Mary and Martha. So in the story, Mary's sitting there. She's sitting at Jesus' feet, just listening. Probably the disciples are probably around. That's kind of a role that typically the men would play, right? The men were sort of they had different roles back then. But she was definitely doing something that all the disciples were doing, and her sister Martha is busy in the kitchen putting together this meal for probably a lot of people. Can you imagine how that would feel? Like you're busy working hard and your sister's just sitting there? I can relate to that. I can relate to that a lot. So she goes up to Jesus and she said, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Like she I think, thinks that Jesus is going to be on her side, or else she wouldn't have gone up to him and said that, right? She thinks, this is obvious. I'm busy working, and that's the role that I'm supposed to do, and she's just sitting there. But what does Jesus say? Martha, Martha. Now, why does it say Martha, Martha? Any thoughts on that? What do you hear when you hear Martha, Martha? You know what I hear? Martha, Martha, Martha. Now, I don't know if that's why it was there. Maybe that was just the greeting, or the way. But it's there for a reason, and I think it gives a sense of, Jesus is trying to say, Martha, you don't get it. He says, you're worried and upset by so many things. She was a worrier. She had to make sure that the casserole came out of the oven and the salad is done and all this. And for her value system, that's what was really important, to be efficient and to be, And he says, you worry about many things, but few things are needed. Now this is interesting. Jesus says few things are needed, and then it's almost like he stops and says, well, wait, not few, really. There's only one thing that's needed. It's like Jesus kind of, almost corrects himself. No, I'm not saying that quite right. Now, I don't know if there's a reason why he said few things are needed at the beginning, but only one is really important. It's just a curious thing. But the point is, there's really only one thing that's important, and what would that be? He doesn't specifically say it. He just says there's one thing important. And then he says Mary has chosen the better one. And so I'm not going to stop her from doing what she's chosen to do. Notice Jesus didn't create this little issue. Martha did. Martha initiated the whole, interaction. Okay, so that's basically the story. Now I want to hear from you. What would you teach on if you were up here and I'm sitting there? Come on. What main points would you want to, elaborate on? What do you think the principles are that we could learn from this? Yes.
Like Jesus is the only one that's worthy of actually dying.
Okay. So Jesus is worthy. You were paying attention from the very beginning, weren't you? That's good. That's good. What else? Okay. Kind of a similar kind of thing, that Jesus is worth stopping, slowing down, listening to. Yeah, what else? Okay, how do we spend our time, right? We could go off on a whole section of how do we spend our day, and that kind of builds on the opening activity, right? All the things that we do in each week. Tutor.
That God takes care of us and we shouldn't worry.
Ah, the whole worry thing. Yeah. He's saying, you worry about so many things. There's only one thing to worry about. Good. What else? Okay. Well, here's the things that I'm going to talk about. Guardians of the Galaxy, Here Comes the Judge, and Two-Face. Now, none of you said any of those, right? You must have missed a whole nother section. Okay, so we're going to cover 3 things, and then we'll dismiss. Guardians of the Galaxy, right? You've seen this movie?
Yeah.
That got me thinking, what is a galaxy? Do you have any idea what a galaxy is? I didn't really. Yeah.
You have the sun in the middle and there's gravity and there's all the other planets and the force of gravity fly, but they stay in one spot. So that's
I think what you mean is a dark hole in the middle, right? You said a sun, because a galaxy has lots of stars in it. The Milky Way galaxy has many stars. But at the center, there's this dark hole, and there's a galaxy is this swirling mass of things around a dark hole. And there's different shapes, spiral galaxies. I didn't know any of this. Here's a picture from the Hubble telescope. They took just a sliver of the galaxy, and they looked at it for a long time. And each one of those little dots is a wait. They took a picture of the universe for a time. Each one of those dots is a whole galaxy in and of itself. And that's just one of, it's huge. there are galaxies all over. Colossians says the Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. This is Jesus. We're talking about the Son. That's Jesus. He created everything. All these billions of galaxies. In John it says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, and through him all things were made. These billions of galaxies he made. And here he is, sitting in Mary and Martha's living room. Do you ever think about that? Jesus is the source of everything, and the world is a lot, I mean, our little world, sometimes I think about, the Greek gods on Olympus, and that God is small compared to the God of the galaxies. And here he is in their living room. Think about how some of the Jews thought about God in the past. This is Mount Sinai. Remember when the Jews are all gathered around it, coming out of Egypt? And God is on the mountain, and there's thunder and lightning, and they were scared out of their minds. That was how they viewed God. Scary. And God is in her living room. Or when God came down into the tabernacle as a pillar of smoke, and he lived in that tent. When he got up and moved, they got up and moved. They followed him every day for 40 years. That God in the Holy of Holies was sitting in her living room. Now, I don't know what person you would be excited to, be obsessed about, what famous person, but we have the opportunity to be obsessed with Jesus, the creator of the galaxies. You've heard of the concept of omnipresent, right? He's everywhere. He's right here, right now. And if you've decided to follow him, he's right here. He lives in you. So Mary understood that. I don't know if she understood it fully at this point, because even the disciples didn't really understand it fully. But she knew that he was someone that all she could do was sit there at his feet and be a part of him, be obsessed with him. And Martha didn't get it. Okay, so that's Guardians of the Galaxy. We have a guardian, Jesus Christ, who created the galaxies and wants to be with you. Here come the judge. Back in the 70s, there was this show called Laugh In, and there was a skit. The guy goes, "Here comes the judge. Here comes the judge." I was going to show you a video clip of it, but it wasn't worth the time. Anyway, that's his picture. Here's the point. When Jesus created the world, it says, then God said, "Let us make man in our own image, according to his likeness." Now, that doesn't mean that God has 2 eyes and 2 ears and a mouth and a nose. What that means is that God is a God of thinking, of rationality. And so he created in Adam and in all of us the ability to think. Like we can think like God thinks. God is a God of feeling. He loves, he hates. And so too do we. He created us with that capacity. God's a creative God, and we create. We do art classes and all kinds of things. But God is a God of judgment. Ultimately, he's going to judge the whole world, you and me and everyone in it, and that's going to be a scary day for some people. But he created us with the capacity to judge too. So if you go to any society in the world, any culture, and you smack someone in the face, they're going to say, "Man, that is just wrong. That is just wrong." Because inside us, in our hearts, we know we have an ability to judge right and wrong. Now, sometimes we get it wrong because we're sinful. But the fact that we know the difference between right and wrong, to me, it's a reason why I believe in God. Because if we just evolved from some amoeba, well, in nature, lions kill zebras all the time, and they don't say, well, that's just wrong. No, they just kill them and they eat them, right? But we have somewhere intertwined in our being the ability to judge what's right and wrong. And so we create our rules, and God gives us rules, right? He gave us the 10 Commandments. He gave us other rules. So rules are not necessarily wrong. It's not necessarily wrong to judge. We're supposed to judge ourselves for sure. Are we doing what's right? Sometimes maybe we're supposed to judge, other Christians because they say, I'm a Christian, but they don't live it, and we're supposed to have a dialogue there. But the point is, we all have our set of rules that we follow, that we live our lives by. And Martha had hers. In her way of viewing things, it was right to work hard and to serve and to sacrifice, all really good things. Hopefully your rules are good rules too. But sometimes we can take our rules and we can apply them in a way that we think, well, we're really right and someone else is wrong. How many of you have brothers or sisters that take your stuff, and then how many of you run to your parents and said, my brother he's in my room, he got into my stuff? Yeah, oh yeah, I know your brothers. I have sympathy for you. But here's the point. You may be right. You may be pointing at your brother and saying, he's breaking the rule. But a lot of times we take those rules and we make them our own rules. It's all about us because we're the center of our little universe, right? What really matters is what's God's rules. And here's the scary part about that. Because I could go through and give you 100 examples of how the way we think the world should work isn't the way the world works. I'm just going to give you three quick examples of how God's rules are different than what we would think our rules should be. You remember the story of the prodigal son? Yes. Anyone not know it? Well, the story of the prodigal son is where there are two brothers. The prodigal, the troublemaker, takes his inheritance, goes off, and basically lives an immoral life. And finally, when he comes back home, his dad welcomes him with open arms because he's sorry for what he did. And they have a big feast, but his older brother, who's been faithful and following the rules and doing everything that his dad said, is angry. Why are you throwing my brother a big party after he's squandered your inheritance? That older brother had a set of rules, but it wasn't God's set of rules, because in the story, the father is like God. The father is symbolic of how God forgives. Okay, second story. Jesus tells a parable about a vineyard owner who needs workers in his field. So he hires some people in the morning, sends them out to work. He hires some people at noon, sends them out to work. Hires some people almost at the end of the day and sends them out to work. Then at the end of all the work, he gets ready to pay them. Well, the people that worked all day think they're going to get paid more. But instead, they all get paid exactly the same. And so those people are grumbling because I worked all day long. This person only worked 1 hour. Why should they get paid the same amount as me? But Jesus says, in my set of rules, the last will be first. You've got your rules, but my rules, my economy is upside down. Okay, the final story. There are Pharisees. There's a Pharisee and a tax collector. They go to the temple to pray. What does the Pharisee say? Oh God, I thank you that I am not like all the other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. Can you believe he would say that? But in this story he does. But the tax collector says, God, have mercy. I'm a sinner. Now, the Pharisee's value system, his set of rules said, he's doing it all right. And he's following all the rules. But in God's value system, it's the humble person that realizes they're utter self-worth. That's the picture we have of Mary and Martha. Both people of faith, but Martha was hanging on to her rules, and she wanted life to work on her rules. And Mary realizes, I got nothing. I got nothing if I'm not in Jesus, or, like, he's the only reason I have value. So, judgment. Okay, the third thing we got, this is very short, so don't get freaked out because we're only 2/3 of the way through. Two-Face. You know who Two-Face is?
Yeah.
Is that disturbing? There, how's that? Two-Face is the guy, he's the villain in Batman who starts out good, has a bad thing happen, scars his face, and then is bitter and all that. But the point is, he's always throwing up a coin, and it's either heads or tails. It's either yes or no. And we might have the tendency to think that worshiping God or service, it's either yes or no. But I don't think it's quite that simple. I think it's sort of like two heads of a coin, yeah.
In the movie Two-Face,
We're going to talk about the Batman, aren't we?
no, his coin was double-headed.
Was it? I'll have to go back and research that. I don't know if that's true. Really? Well, I wouldn't want to question you because I know you know a lot. Anyway, back to the lesson. I think in this case, it's like two sides of the same coin, right? We need to come to the point of realizing we're nothing outside of Jesus. And that is at the core of worship. Worship is essentially realizing I'm nothing, you're everything, and that's where I find my value. But if you've really come to realize that, then you're going to want to give back to God. You know who this is? This old person? Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa lived in Calcutta. It was a very dangerous city. She lived in a convent, and people told her, don't go outside the convent because it's dangerous. You might get hurt. Just stay in the convent and do your job, and that's all you have to do. She didn't want to do that. She knew how God had saved her, and she wanted to help other people. And so she went outside the convent and she sacrificed. And, she's known maybe as one of the people who have done the most in terms of living a life of service. The point is, work is not a bad thing. I have this Bible verse on my desk at work. I've had it there for 30 years. It says, whatever you do, work at it with all of your heart as working for the Lord and not for men. You know that you'll receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It's the Lord God you're serving. So, yes, worship is important, but so is service. So, I don't think this story is meant to put one down and the other up. It's to say one comes out of a right heart with God. All right, so those are my 3 points. There's probably others. We could talk about worry. That'd be a good one. I worry about a lot of things. I'm a lot like Martha. But anyway. And again, okay, wake up everyone. Wake up. This is like, have you played Mafia?
Yes.
Okay, everyone wake up.
Oh no, Derek.
Jesus is worthy. That's the bottom line. All right.
I have one thing to say before we.
Yeah.
On the back of your opening activity is a closing activity. This is Jesus